I can't begin to tell you what an honor it is for me to stand here before you, to be with all of you in this room, and to welcome all of you who are watching from wherever you are. I have known this woman for over 30 years. I have had the gift of loving her and being her close friend. It is with the greatest privilege I have to introduce each and every one of you to my friend, Marianna Williamson.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for coming. I know some of you actually came from somewhat far away, some of you from other places in the country. I also want to thank those of you who are on live stream, who have joined me here today for what I hope will feel like a meaningful conversation. Martin Luther King said that our lives begin to end on the day that we stop talking about things that matter. And we are here today to talk about something that matters a lot, and that is the United States of America. Now, we're all here because we care about this country, but we're all here, or at least many of us are, because we are upset about this country. We're worried about this country. We're concerned about this country. And we know that this country is plagued by many challenges now, not the least of which is hatred and division, which is greater than any of us have experienced in our national life. And it is our job to create a vision of justice and love that is so powerful that it will override the forces of hatred and injustice and fear that now plague us. It's one thing, though, to say that we're here because we want to do that. It's another thing to know, how do we do that? And as one young man who might be in the audience today, with such youthful sincerity, once said to me, he said, "Marianna, what are we going to do?" But what I've learned in my life is that the first question isn't always, what do I do? The first question is often, what do I need to understand? And before the United States or any of us can know what it is we need to do, we need to know what it is we need to understand. This country is drowning in information and starving for understanding. What we need to understand is the American story. And so just as when sometimes you're trying to understand your own life better by looking at your parents, at your grandparents, at your ancestors, it's time for us to look at the entire sweep of the American story, to understand better our past, that we might better understand where we are now. We need to know, what do we owe our ancestors and what do we know our descendants? And we can't know any of that until we see where we stand in the midst of the larger scope of the American story. Now, the American story began as an established nation in 1776. And in 1776, some very brave men, yes, they were very brave, because if the British had won the war, all of them would have been hanged as traitors against the King of England. 56 men who came together and signed a document that infused the founding of a nation in a way that had never occurred before, with the idea repudiating the idea of the divine right of kings, repudiating the idea of an aristocracy, repudiating the idea that a few would be able to suck up the resources of the country and make everyone else nothing more than an economic serf. They repudiated that. And they declared that all men are created equal, that all men are given by God inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. They declared that it's the job of government to secure those rights, and that if government isn't doing its job, then the people have the right to alter it or to abolish it. Now, that was extraordinary, of course, but it's also where the story got very gnarly. For out of the 56 men who signed that document, 41 of them were slave owners. So that dichotomy between the extraordinarily enlightened principles politically and enlightened principles morally, on which we purport to stand, is often at odds with forces within our country who usually, for their own economic purposes, have no intention whatsoever of seeing those principles actualized, and have proven in every generation, even unto ours, that they will go to the most violent lengths to make sure they don't. That, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, is the American story. That dichotomy, that split mind, which is American consciousness, is baked into the cake. And it has been with us from the beginning, and every generation of Americans reiterates the story. What we are going through right now is baked into the cake here. It is no different than what other generations have faced, but I'm here to say to you, other generations stood up and pushed back, and now it's our turn. That's what we need to do. Yes, we need to identify the problems in our past, but we need to identify with the problem solvers in our past. We responded to slavery with abolition. We responded to the institutionalized oppression of women with the women's suffrage movement. We responded to the Gilded Age with the establishment of the labor movement and the New Deal. We responded to segregation with the civil rights movement, and it is our turn now. But once again, we have to understand what's happening here. Because for the abolitionists, the problem was the institution of slavery. For the women's suffragists, it was the fact that we didn't have women's suffrage. You needed to pass a constitutional amendment. We needed to establish the labor movement. We knew that the problem was segregation. And so you needed the civil rights movement. You needed civil rights legislation. You needed voting rights legislation. The reason we have such a problem today is because it is not one specific institution that plagues us and that opposes real democracy and that opposes the equality of people and of economic justice, that opposes the very principles on which we stand. It's not one institution this time. It's like an atomizer spray of economic injustice. It is over here. It's Flint, Michigan over here, and its water's drying up and aquifers and rivers drying up in the American South over here. It's mass incarceration over there. It's 68,000 people who die every year from lack of health care over here. It's no one particular thing. And so it's easy to gaslight us, and we're playing whack-a-mole. If we could just get that fixed, if we could just get that fixed. No, the opponent is not a specific situation or circumstance. The opponent is an economic mindset. The opponent is an economic mindset that has had its grip on this country for the last 50 years. Over the last 48 years, there has been $50 trillion of wealth that has been transferred from the bottom 90% to the top 1% of people in this country. This country is now in the grip of an economic mindset, whatever you call it. Some people call it neoliberalism. Some people call it free market capitalism. Some people call it crony capitalism. Some people call it hyper-capitalism. Let me tell you something. It's neither real capitalism nor is it a free market. It is a sociopathic economic system. It is a sociopathic economic system. That in policy after policy after policy makes sure that those who already have will probably get more, and those who do not have will have a hard time even surviving. I remind you that in the 1970s, the average American worker had decent benefits and could afford a home and could afford a yearly vacation and could afford a car and could afford to send their kids to college. Before the 1960s, tuition was free at state colleges and universities. That was then, and this is now. This did not just fall out of the sky. This is by design. And that design is now baked into the cake in this town where there are 3 times more corporate lobbyists than there are legislators in Washington, D.C. This philosophy, this economic mindset now has its grip on this country. It has its tentacles in every aspect of our lives. It has its grip on this government. This government is now more than not a system of legalized bribery. And this system will not change itself. The status quo, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else will not disrupt itself. That's our job. We should remember that Abraham Lincoln, standing on the battlefield at Gettysburg, speaking of the men who had died there fighting for the Union, said that they had given their last full measure of devotion so that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from the earth. It's time for us to look in the mirror as Americans and face the very painful fact government of the people, by the people, and for the people is perishing now. This government is now a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. Why does 1 in 4 Americans carry medical debt? Why is it that 18 million Americans cannot fulfill the prescriptions that are given them by their doctors? Why is it that 68,000 Americans die in this country every year for lack of health care? Why? Because we don't have universal health care, because just like every other advanced democracy. These positions, such as universal health care, such as tuition-free college, higher education, and tech school, such as free child care, such as paid family leave and sick pay, such as a guaranteed living wage, and such as a 21st century economic bill of rights. Those are moderate positions in every other country. Every other country has them. They are mainstream. Ladies and gentlemen, hear me when I tell you this. The American people have been trained to expect so little. The American people have been played. But this is a new time in America. And many people who realize, even if they themselves are not living at the effect of all of this entrenched injustice, know that the fact that that entrenched injustice exists is an unsustainable position. I'm so glad that President Trump did not win the last election. That means we didn't go over the cliff, but I'll tell you something, we're still 6 inches away from it. We are 6 inches away from the cliff in terms of the state of our democracy. We are 6 inches away from the cliff in terms of the state of our environment. We are 6 inches away from the cliff in terms of the state of our economy. This is not something where you can just tweak it here and have an incremental approach there and try to change things here and a little bit there. Oh, that'll work fine for the 20% of Americans for whom the economy is basically okay. But those 20%, those of us who live on that island of 20% of Americans for whom things are basically good, are surrounded by a vast sea of economic anxiety and despair. We don't need any more evidence that this system is intrinsically corrupt. We can see it in the broken windows. We can see it in the shattered factories. We can see it in the addiction-addled brokenness of our fellow citizens. We can see it in the despair. We can see it in the addiction. We can see it in the anxiety. We can see it in the depression. And people in this town, if they will not care enough to solve the problems that produces all that despair, half the people in this city don't even notice it. They are so buffered from the ravages of human suffering, they don't even mention the word poor. They don't even mention the word poverty, much less address its deeper causes. So some people in this city just don't even seem to care. Some people in this city, with some very brave exceptions, apparently don't have the spine or the moral courage to fix it. Ladies and gentlemen, let me in there. I will. This is the thing. The American people are up for the job. The American people are ready for the task. The American people, look at all the people protesting environmental injustice. Look at all the people who are trying to take stands against the injustices of things like Cop City, things like the deaths of environmental activists. People who are reforming and revitalizing the labor movement in this country. People who are showing new ways to do agriculture, standing up for indigenous rights, standing up for women's rights, standing up for gender liberty, standing up for all of the things that America should be standing for because it represents equality of economic opportunity, social opportunity, political opportunity. Yet the political system as it now exists is institutionally resistant to profound solutions when they do not serve the short-term economic profit maximization of large-form corporate systems, which are the donors and are the people who rule this town. And so it's not like we don't have the solutions. There are people in this town who have the solutions. There are people all over this country who have the solutions. But the people who are in power either don't have the solutions or do not deeply support the solutions. And people who have the solutions do not have the power. Once again, let the people get in there. We'll handle it from here. And so I asked you to come here today and to join with me, both those of you who are here live and those of you who are on live stream. I have run for president before. I am not naive. I'm not naive about the forces which have no intention of allowing anyone into this conversation who does not align with their predetermined agenda. I understand that in their mind, only those people whose careers have been entrenched in the car that drove us into this ditch should possibly be considered qualified to lead us out of this ditch. But I reject that notion. And those pseudo-sophisticates who give us their PR about how they're the adults, you see, and people like myself and people like most of you should really sit down now. They would have us think this whole thing is just too complicated. No, ladies and gentlemen, the problem is not that it's complicated. The problem is that it is corrupt. And to those who feel that they are the adults in the room, they are the sophisticates in the room, and the rest of us should simply sit down and let them run things. Yes, where they have run things is to where we are now. To them I say, you are neither sophisticated nor a true grown-up. A real grown-up does not knowingly allow a child to go hungry. We should be making an emergency level just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy, and an emergency level just transition from a war economy to a peace economy. None of those fundamental changes are going to happen, however, until and unless we the people step in. No one person can fix it. This is a time of collective effort. All of us are necessary in whatever way our heart leads us to serve. This is not a time, however, to just ask, what can I get? It's time to ask, how can I serve? I'm not saying that one person can fix it. I'm not saying even one president can fix it. But let me tell you something, a president who lays it down and says it like it is would do a lot of good. And so I'm here today, again, with my deep thanks for your coming here. I have a request to make. I, as of today, am a candidate for the office of President of the United States. And I am reminded and I am guided by the words of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said that a necessitous man is not a free man. Not every chain is visible. It is time for us to release the shackles that are on the 64% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck. It is time for us to do what other generations have done. And Franklin Roosevelt said that we would not have to worry about a fascist takeover, he said, as long as democracy delivered on its blessings. Given the economic situation of far too many Americans today, given the behavior of this corporate matrix, whether it has to do with insurance companies, big pharmaceutical companies, big oil companies, big agricultural companies, big food companies, big chemical companies, or the military industrial complex and the defense contractors that they serve, they have had their day. Corporate tyranny will end now. Only a few. We will not be able to say to the American people in 2024 that we're helping you enough already and we'll help you more because things are basically pretty good. That will not be strong enough to push back the neo-fascist authoritarian threat that is in our midst. We need to remember what Franklin Roosevelt said. We will not have to worry about that threat as long as democracy delivers on its blessings. We don't need to do anything other than stand for democracy, stand for the principles of the Declaration of Independence, stand for the best within us. Reject within ourselves the nihilism, reject within ourselves the cynicism, reject within ourselves the personal anger. We must remember what Martin Luther King said. We must conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. And it is from that place that I request your donations, I request your volunteerism, I request your help. And I say to you now, again, hear me, it's our turn. Let's do this. Thank you very much.